I am Amanda Wilson, 32 years old, and until recently, I was the secret breadwinner of my husband Brandon's entire family. My online business generates $10 million annually, yet my mother-in-law Patricia never saw me as good enough. I paid for everything from their mortgage to medical bills, but it wasn't enough. When Patricia finally sneered, "Leave you uneducated lowlife," I shocked everyone by saying okay, and moving to my vacation home in Hawaii. If you're enjoying this story, please hit that like button and subscribe. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and get ready for a wild ride about standing up for yourself. My story begins in Lakefield, Michigan, a town so small most GPS systems struggle to find it. I grew up in a loving but financially struggling household. My parents' hard-working and honest people instilled in me the values of determination and self-reliance. Despite being a straight-A student in high school, college became financially impossible after my first year when my dad lost his factory job. Unable to afford tuition, I made the difficult decision to drop out and start working. While my friends continued their education, I taught myself coding, digital marketing, and e-commerce principles through free online resources. I would stay up until 3 in the morning working my retail job during the day, and learning everything I could about online business at night. People in town whispered about how I was wasting my potential, but I knew I was building something even if no one else could see it yet. I met Brandon Lewis 5 years ago at a mutual friend's barbecue. He stood out immediately with his artistic demeanor and infectious laugh. Brandon was everything I wasn't at the time, carefree and dreamy with a bachelor's degree in fine arts from a prestigious university. He painted these incredible abstract landscapes that seemed to capture emotions rather than places. When we started talking about color theory and how it affects human psychology, the hours flew by. Our connection was instant and powerful. Despite our vastly different backgrounds, Brandon came from an established family in Chicago. His father Richard was a retired surgeon, and his mother Patricia came from old money with a family name that apparently opened doors throughout the Midwest. His sister Stephanie had followed their father's footsteps into medicine, working as a dermatologist at a high-end clinic. The first time Brandon brought me to his family home for dinner, I noticed how Patricia's smile never quite reached her eyes when she looked at me. She asked about my university experience, and when I explained I had to leave after 1 year, she said, "How brave of you to admit that," before quickly changing the subject. Throughout dinner she mentioned at least 5 times how Brandon's ex-girlfriend was now finishing her doctorate at Yale. Despite these warning signs, Brandon and I fell deeply in love. He valued my practical nature and entrepreneurial spirit, while I admired his creativity and emotional intelligence. We balanced each other perfectly. After dating for a year, Brandon proposed during a simple picnic by the lake. It wasn't grand or extravagant, but it was heartfelt and perfectly us. When we told his family about our engagement, Patricia's response was telling. "Well, I suppose sometimes love doesn't consider practicalities." Richard was more welcoming, congratulating us with genuine warmth, though I could tell he too had reservations. Stephanie barely looked up from her phone to acknowledge the news. We had a small wedding at a local botanical garden, with just 40 guests. My side had close friends, and my immediate family all beaming with happiness. Brandon's side was smaller, but notably included several distant relatives. Patricia insisted on inviting, most of whom spoke to me for less than a minute throughout the entire day. During the reception, I overheard Patricia telling one of these relatives, "It's just a phase. He's always been drawn to unusual projects." After our honeymoon, a budget-friendly trip to the Florida Keys, we moved into a modest 2-bedroom house I had been renting. Brandon set up a studio space in the 2nd bedroom to continue his art while I transformed a corner of our living room into my workspace. My online business was still in its infancy, selling handcrafted organization systems through an Etsy shop. I had noticed how people struggled with managing their home offices and created customizable solutions that were both functional and aesthetically pleasing. Every morning I would wake up at 5, answer customer emails, process orders, and handle shipping before most people had their first cup of coffee. Brandon would emerge around 10, make us breakfast, and then retreat to his studio. He genuinely supported my ambitions and believed in me completely, even when sales were slow and stress was high. In those early days, his emotional support meant everything. What Brandon lacked in financial contribution he made up for in encouragement and love. He would bring me tea during late-night work sessions, massage my shoulders when I hunched over the computer too long, and celebrate every small business victory as if I'd won an Olympic medal. His family, however, especially Patricia, made it clear they thought he could do better than a small-time internet seller with no proper credentials. The turning point for my business came when a popular home organization influencer featured my custom desk organization system on her Instagram page. Orders flooded in faster than I could fulfill them. Within a week, I had to temporarily close my shop to catch up with the sudden demand. Brandon helped by packaging orders late into the night, both of us working on our living room floor, surrounded by shipping materials. I quickly realized I needed to scale up. Using the profits from this surge, I rented a small warehouse space, hired 2 part-time assistants, and expanded my product line. My background in self-taught coding allowed me to build a professional website, breaking free from the constraints of third-party platforms. Each month sales increased. 3 months after that first viral moment, I was generating over $100,000 in monthly revenue. As the business grew, our lifestyle began to change. We moved from our modest rental to a larger home in a well-established neighborhood. The down payment came entirely from my business earnings. Brandon was thrilled with our new place, especially the dedicated studio space with perfect natural lighting. He immediately invited his family over for a housewarming dinner. Patricia walked through our new home with an evaluating eye. "This is certainly a cute little house," she said, emphasizing little, in a way that made it clear she found it inadequate. "At least it's in a neighborhood where Brandon won't feel completely out of place." Every compliment was wrapped in a subtle criticism. She pointedly asked if I had hired a proper interior designer, then nodded knowingly when I said I had decorated it myself. Despite Patricia's backhanded compliments, business continued to boom. I expanded into custom closet systems, home office solutions, and kitchen organization. My social media following grew, and with it a community of devoted customers. I reinvested profits into product development and marketing, always thinking long-term. With my increased income, I decided to surprise Brandon with something special. I secretly purchased a beautiful beach house in Hawaii, a modest but stunning property with ocean views. I planned to reveal it on our anniversary, as a getaway place where he could paint inspired by new landscapes. The property cost nearly $1 million, a significant investment, but one I could afford thanks to the business's success. As my company expanded, so did the financial responsibilities I took on for Brandon's family. It started small when Richard mentioned needing dental work, not covered by insurance. Without hesitation, I offered to pay the $8,000 bill. Patricia accepted as if it was expected, not even a thank you. Soon after, Stephanie's car broke down, and again I stepped in with $20,000 for a new vehicle. Brandon had gradually shifted away from his artistic pursuits. His paintings sat unfinished in his studio, while he spent more time shopping, meeting friends for long lunches, and accompanying his mother to social events. When I gently asked about his art, he would say he was in a creative transition or gathering inspiration. I supported this, believing everyone's creative journey has different phases. Family dinners at Patricia and Richard's house became increasingly uncomfortable affairs. Patricia would interrogate me about business details, not from interest, but seemingly to find flaws. "And you managed all this without proper business training. How unusual," she would say, making my success sound like a fluke, rather than the result of thousands of hours of hard work. One particularly painful dinner occurred after I had been featured in a regional business magazine. Instead of celebrating this achievement, Patricia steered the conversation toward Brandon's college friend, who had just received a prestigious art fellowship. "Now that's the kind of accomplishment that comes from proper education and background," she said pointedly. When Brandon mentioned my magazine feature, Patricia dismissed it with, "Those online businesses are so trendy right now." I wonder what Amanda will do when the fad passes. I tried countless approaches to win Patricia's approval. I dressed more conservatively for family gatherings donated to her favorite charities, even took elocution classes to soften my Midwestern accent after overhearing her comment on my provincial manner of speaking. Nothing worked. The goalpost kept moving, and her criticisms became more overt as my business grew more successful. By our third anniversary, my business had expanded to include a team of 30 employees, a larger warehouse facility, and a customer service department. We were generating $5 million annually, with healthy profit margins and strong growth projections. Yet, in Patricia's eyes, I remained the uneducated girl who had somehow tricked her son into marriage. The business continued its upward trajectory, reaching new milestones that even I found hard to believe. A collaboration with a major retailer put my products in stores nationwide. Our online presence exploded after a viral social media campaign featuring real customers and their organization transformations. Within 18 months of that retail partnership, annual revenue hit $5 million. The modest business I had built from scratch now employed 50 people and operated from a 10,000 square foot facility. Despite this overwhelming success, my personal life was becoming increasingly complicated. Brandon had fully abandoned his artistic pursuits, now spending his days managing his social life and family obligations. His parents had begun having financial difficulties after Richard developed heart problems that required expensive specialized treatment not fully covered by insurance. One evening, as we were getting ready for bed, Brandon made a suggestion that would alter the course of our marriage. "Honey, I've been thinking," he said casually. "Mom and Dad are struggling with the house maintenance, and Dad's health isn't great. What if we moved in with them for a while? Just to help out?" I was immediately hesitant. Move into their house? But we have our own home that we love. Brandon looked at me with those persuasive eyes that had first drawn me to him. It would mean so much to them. Dad needs help climbing the stairs, and Mom is stressed trying to manage everything. Plus, think of the money we'd save on our mortgage if we rented out our place. The irony of him suggesting we save money when my business was generating millions wasn't lost on me, but his concern for his parents seemed genuine. After a week of discussions, and against my better judgment, I agreed to the arrangement, telling myself it would be temporary. We moved into the Lewis family's sprawling colonial house in one of Chicago's most prestigious neighborhoods the following month. From day one, Patricia established the household hierarchy. Despite my financial contributions, she maintained control over everything from meal planning to decor choices. "This house has been in the Lewis family for generations," she reminded me constantly. "We have certain ways of doing things." What started as helping out quickly evolved into full financial support. I paid for a complete renovation of their outdated kitchen because Patricia mentioned how embarrassed she was to host her garden club with antiquated appliances. When Richard needed a specialized cardiac procedure, I covered the $60,000 bill without question. New cars, property taxes, country club memberships, all quietly added to my financial responsibilities. Brandon's sister Stephanie approached me about funding a medical spa business she wanted to start. Despite her having no business experience, I invested $200,000 to help her launch. The business failed within 6 months due to her poor management and frequent absences. When I gently asked about the investment, Patricia interjected, "Stephanie has been under so much stress. It's just money after all. Family is what matters." Throughout this time, my relationship with Brandon deteriorated subtly but steadily. He spent more time with his parents than with me, often siding with his mother during disagreements. If I expressed frustration about Patricia's behavior, he would accuse me of being oversensitive or not understanding family dynamics. Our intimate moments became rare, replaced by household discussions that felt more like business meetings. My business continued to thrive despite my personal challenges. We expanded internationally, developed a premium product line, and launched a successful subscription service. Annual revenue climbed to $10 million. I hired a CEO to handle daily operations, but still worked long hours overseeing product development, and strategic planning. The irony was painful, working tirelessly to earn money that supported a family that didn't respect me. I became increasingly isolated in the very house I was financing. I would overhear Patricia telling visitors about Brandon's little wife who does something with online sales, as if my business was a cute hobby rather than the source of their comfortable lifestyle. I maintained a home office in what was formerly a maid's room off the kitchen, the smallest bedroom in the house, while Stephanie had a visiting suite larger than some apartments. When I attempted to discuss the situation with Brandon, his responses became predictable. "You know how Mom is," he would say, with a shrug. "She comes from a different generation." Or worse, "After everything we've done for you, bringing you into this family, can't you just try harder to fit in?" The implication that I should be grateful for being accepted by them, while simultaneously funding their entire lifestyle, was a bitter pill to swallow. Patricia never missed an opportunity to remind everyone of the Lewis family legacy. Dinner conversations regularly featured stories of distinguished ancestors, prestigious family connections, and social accomplishments, always with subtle comparisons to my unknown lineage. "We Lewis women have always prioritized education and social grace," she would say while looking directly at me. Despite all this, I stayed. I stayed because I loved Brandon, or at least the person I thought he was when we met. I stayed because I had invested so much in this relationship, both emotionally and financially. I stayed because leaving felt like admitting failure. But with each passing day, the weight of living under Patricia's constant judgment grew heavier, and my once boundless energy began to fade. The situation reached its breaking point on a crisp autumn evening. Patricia had decided to host an elaborate dinner party for what she called the Inner Circle, a group of her most elite friends from the country club and various charity boards. As with all household expenses, I was expected to fund the event, while Patricia handled the planning, deliberately excluding me from any decisions. I overheard her on the phone with the caterer specifying that everything must be absolutely top tier because some guests were accustomed to dining at ambassadors' residences. The final bill for one evening's entertainment was over $15,000, which I paid without comment. Patricia didn't thank me, merely nodding, as if I'd simply performed an expected duty. On the evening of the party, I wore a conservative black dress that I hoped would meet Patricia's approval. She glanced at me and frowned. "Couldn't you have worn something a bit more? Special Eleanor Crawford will be here, and her daughter-in-law always wears Valentino." There was no winning this game, and I knew it. During cocktails, I stood awkwardly at the periphery of conversations, occasionally catching snippets of discussions about exclusive boarding schools, recent trips to the Maldives, and someone's new summer home in the Hamptons. Brandon circulated comfortably among these people, his natural charm making him a favorite. From across the room I watched him laugh with an elderly gentleman completely in his element. As I refreshed my drink, I overheard Patricia speaking to two elegantly dressed women near the fireplace. "Yes, Brandon married somewhat." Unexpectedly, she was saying, in a hushed tone. "We had always assumed he would end up with Margaret Sinclair. You remember her pursuing her second doctorate now. But you know how boys can be when they decide to rebel. He married down, but we make it work. Family accepts these challenges." My hand trembled slightly as I set down my glass. After 4 years of marriage, countless financial contributions, and endless attempts to gain acceptance, I was still the embarrassing secret, the mistake Brandon had made during a rebellious phase. Dinner was served in the formal dining room, where Patricia had arranged the seating to place me between two of the quieter guests, far from the livelier conversations at her end of the table. As the first course was served, one of Patricia's friends turned to me with what seemed like genuine interest. "Amanda, dear," she said, "Brandon mentioned you attended Northwestern. What did you study there?" Before I could answer that I had only completed 1 year, before financial constraints forced me to leave, Patricia interjected from across the table. "Amanda is more of a self-taught success story," she said with a tight smile. "Not everyone's path includes formal education. More wine." Eleanor. The swift subject change wasn't lost on anyone at the table. I felt my cheeks burn with humiliation as several guests exchanged knowing glances. Brandon, seated near his mother, focused intently on his plate, avoiding my eyes. After the guests departed around midnight, I began helping the catering staff clean up a habit from my modest upbringing that Patricia had repeatedly criticized as making the staff uncomfortable. Richard had already retired to bed, and Stephanie had left early, claiming a headache. As I gathered empty glasses from the living room, Patricia stormed in, her face flushed with anger, or perhaps too much wine. "Must you always embarrass us?" she hissed, keeping her voice low but sharp. "Eleanor asked about your education because she was trying to be polite. You should have gracefully changed the subject yourself instead of forcing me to intervene." I set down the glasses, carefully determined to remain calm. I was about to answer her question honestly. "I'm not ashamed of my path." Patricia laughed, a cold sound without humor. "Well, perhaps you should be. Do you have any idea how it reflects on this family to have a daughter-in-law with no proper education, no family background, nothing to contribute to conversations, except tales of selling trinkets online?" "Those trinkets," I said quietly, "pay for this house, and the cars, and Richard's medical bills, and tonight's $15,000 dinner party." Her face contorted with rage. "How dare you throw that in my face? Money is so vulgar. Anyone can make money. Brandon married beneath him, but we accepted you despite your background. And this is how you repay our generosity. By embarrassing us in front of our closest friends." The accumulation of years of slights, dismissals, and thinly veiled insults finally reached a tipping point. "I have done everything possible to fit into your world. I've changed how I dress, how I speak, even what I eat. I've paid for everything this family has needed or wanted for years. What more could you possibly want from me?" Patricia drew herself up, eyes narrowing. "What we want is for Brandon to have a wife who enhances his position in society, not someone who drags him down. You may have money, but you'll always be uneducated and fundamentally jobless. You sell things on the internet, for heaven's sake. It's hardly a real career." Brandon chose this moment to enter the room, looking uncomfortable at finding us in conflict. "What's going on?" Patricia immediately softened her tone. "Your wife is upset because I had to smooth over another awkward social situation. Eleanor was asking about universities, and you know how sensitive Amanda is about her educational limitations." I looked at Brandon, silently pleading with him to defend me, to acknowledge all I had done for his family. Instead, he sighed and turned to me with disappointment in his eyes. "Amanda, can't you just let things go sometimes? Mom was trying to help. You know how important these connections are." In that moment, something broke inside me. After years of supporting everyone financially, emotionally, and practically, I was still the problem. I was still not good enough. Patricia, emboldened by Brandon's support, delivered the final blow. "If you find our standards so difficult to meet, perhaps you should reconsider your place here. Why don't you just leave, you lowlife? Go back to whatever little town produced someone with your limited outlook." The room fell silent. Brandon looked shocked but said nothing to contradict his mother. He simply stood there, mouth slightly open, as if uncertain how to process this escalation. I felt an unexpected calm wash over me, the kind that comes with absolute clarity. "Okay," I said simply. Patricia blinked clearly, not expecting this response. "Okay, what?" "Okay, I'll leave," I replied, my voice steady. "You're right. I don't belong here, and I never will, no matter what I do or how much I contribute." I walked past them both and up the stairs to the bedroom I shared with Brandon. As I began pulling a suitcase from the closet, Brandon followed me, his expression panicked. "You can't be serious," he said. "Mom didn't mean it. She had too much wine. You know how she gets after these parties." I continued methodically packing essentials, feeling strangely detached. "She meant every word, Brandon. And you stood there and let her say it. After everything I've done for this family, That's where your loyalty lies. Where would you even go? He asked, his tone suggesting he didn't believe I had options. I paused my packing and looked at him directly. Hawaii. To our beach house. His confusion was immediate. What beach house? The one I bought 2 years ago as an anniversary surprise. The one I never got to show you because we were always too busy with your family's needs and emergencies. Brandon's face cycled through shock, confusion, and then calculation. You bought a house without telling me. With our money. The possessive our money struck me as both ironic and revealing. With the money I earned, I corrected him. The money that's been supporting this entire household. I finished packing, took my laptop and essential documents, and wrote a brief note explaining that I would be staying at our Hawaiian property indefinitely. As I carried my suitcase downstairs, Patricia stood at the bottom, arms crossed clearly, not believing I would actually leave. Running away won't solve anything, she said coldly. It only proves you don't have the fortitude to be part of this family. I looked at her, for what I knew might be the last time. Thank you for making it so clear that I never was. The drive to the airport in the pre-dawn hours was surreal. Chicago's streets were nearly empty, the city lights reflecting off the rain-slicked pavement. I had booked a flight using my phone while finishing my packing a first-class ticket to Honolulu, leaving at 6:15 in the morning. As the plane took off, I watched the city shrink below me, feeling a mixture of heartbreak and surprisingly relief. The Hawaiian house keys felt heavy in my pocket, a tangible reminder that I had created options for myself that no one, not even Brandon, knew about. 16 hours later, I stood on the lanai of my beach house, watching waves crash against the shore, as the sun set in a blaze of orange and pink. The sound of the ocean replaced the constant criticism and demands that had become the soundtrack of my life. I was alone, yes, but for the first time in years I could breathe freely. The first morning I woke up in Hawaii, disorientation hit me before memory caught up. The sound of waves and the soft island breeze through open windows replaced the usual sounds of Patricia's early morning kitchen bustling and passive-aggressive sighs whenever I came down later than 7:30. For several minutes I lay in bed watching sunlight dance across the ceiling, torn between crushing sadness and unexpected lightness. The beach house was exactly as I remembered from my brief visits to purchase and furnish it. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, with an open-concept living area that faced the Pacific Ocean. The decor was simple but elegant, inspired by local materials and craftsmanship rather than the ostentatious luxury Patricia preferred. Walking barefoot across warm wooden floors to make my first cup of coffee, I realized this was the first home I'd lived in for years that didn't carry Patricia's judgment in every corner. That first day passed in a fog of jet lag and emotional exhaustion. I ignored the constant vibration of my phone, watching the number of missed calls and messages climb. Most were from Brandon, starting with angry demands to know where exactly I was, evolving into confused questions about the beach house, and finally shifting to pleas for me to stop this nonsense and come home. His definition of home, I noted, was his parents' house, not the place we had chosen together. By the second day, I forced myself to establish a routine. To morning swim in the ocean, breakfast on the lanai, then a few hours of work checking in with my executive team. The business continued to operate smoothly in my partial absence, a testament to the strong leadership I'd put in place. In the afternoons, I explored the local area, familiarizing myself with nearby shops, restaurants, and walking paths. It was during one of these afternoon explorations that I met Jasmine, my next-door neighbor. A retired professor in her 60s with silver-streaked dark hair and a perpetual smile, she was tending to the plumeria trees that separated our properties. "So, the mysterious owner finally appears," she called out cheerfully when she spotted me. We neighbors were beginning to think this was a ghost house. Her friendly openness was so different from the calculated social interactions I'd grown accustomed to that I found myself accepting her invitation for iced tea on her patio. Unlike Patricia's interrogative conversations designed to find weaknesses, Jasmine asked questions from genuine curiosity. When I gave vague answers about taking a break from the mainland, she didn't press for details. "Whatever brought you here?" she said, refilling my glass. The island has a way of helping people find what they need. Sometimes that's healing, sometimes it's clarity, sometimes it's just a good night's sleep without mainland noise. That simple conversation with Jasmine became my first real friendship in years. I hadn't realized how isolated I'd become in Chicago, where every social connection came through Patricia's carefully curated network. Jasmine introduced me to other neighbors and local business owners without agenda or expectation. My business thrived with my renewed focus and creativity. Free from constant interruptions and demands, I developed new product lines and explored international manufacturing partnerships. Video conferences replaced in-person meetings, and I found my team actually preferred my more direct communication style from Hawaii compared to when I'd been constantly stressed in Chicago. Morning beach walks became my therapy. The repetitive sound of waves, the feeling of sand between my toes and the vast horizon helped put my situation into perspective. I began to recognize how much of myself I had compromised in the futile attempt to win Patricia's approval. The realization was both painful and liberating. Brandon's calls became less frequent, but more intense. 2 weeks after my departure, he left a voicemail that broke through my growing peace. The bank called about the mortgage, his voice sounded strained. And Dad's doctor is saying he needs another procedure. Mom's freaking out. I don't know what to do. Please call me back. I did call him back, but set boundaries around the conversation. Yes, I would continue paying for Richard's medical care directly to the providers. No, I would not resume the mortgage payments unless my name was added to the property deed. No, I would not be returning to Chicago in the immediate future. You can't just abandon us. Brandon's voice cracked with what sounded like genuine distress. We're family. Am I family? I asked quietly. Was I family when your mother called me a lowlife and told me to leave? Were you thinking of family when you stood there and said nothing? His silence was answer enough. 3 weeks into my Hawaiian residence, Brandon appeared unannounced at my door. He looked haggard with shadows under his eyes and wrinkled clothes that suggested he'd come straight from the airport. How did you find the address? I asked, not inviting him in. Your assistant, he admitted. I told her it was an emergency. I made a mental note to discuss boundaries with my team, but led Brandon to the lanai where we sat facing the ocean. His eyes widened, taking in the property. This is ours, he asked, emphasizing the our in a way that felt presumptuous given recent events. This is mine, I corrected gently. Purchased with my business earnings before our financial situation became completely entangled with your parents. The conversation that followed was tense and revealing. Brandon swung between anger at my selfish abandonment and desperate appeals to my compassion. The family was struggling without my financial support. Patricia had been forced to cancel her country club membership. Stephanie had taken a job at a regular dermatology clinic rather than her boutique practice. Richard's health was declining partly from stress. So come home, Brandon pleaded, reaching for my hand across the table. Everything can go back to normal. Normal wasn't working for me, I replied, pulling my hand back. Normal was being treated like an ATM, while simultaneously being told I wasn't good enough. Normal was watching you choose your mother's approval over your wife's dignity again and again. Brandon's expression hardened. So that's it. You're just going to punish everyone because your feelings got hurt. This is why Mom always said you didn't have the breeding to handle family obligations. His words confirmed what I had begun to suspect during my time alone. The man I had fallen in love with either never truly existed or had been completely subsumed by his family's values. Either way, the Brandon sitting before me was not someone who respected me as a partner. I think you should go, I said calmly. We can discuss financial arrangements through our attorneys. Brandon left angry and empty-handed. I stood on the beach watching the sunset that evening, feeling strangely stronger for having faced him and maintained my boundaries. For the first time since leaving Chicago, I allowed myself to fully cry, mourning not just the end of my marriage, but the years I had spent trying to be someone I wasn't, for people who would never value me. The following weeks brought unexpected growth. I joined a local outrigger canoe club, developing both physical strength and new friendships. I attended community events, something Patricia would have dismissed as provincial, and found genuine connection with people who asked what I thought, rather than where I studied. My business expanded into new markets with a collection inspired by Hawaiian organizational principles. Our social media following doubled after I began sharing more authentic content about intentional living and mindful spaces. The company exceeded revenue projections for the quarter, proving that my personal crisis hadn't damaged my professional capabilities. One rainy afternoon, I discovered an art supply store in town, and on impulse purchased a beginner's watercolor set. Setting up on my covered lanai during the shower, I attempted to capture the misty mountains visible through the rain. The result was amateur at best, but the process brought me unexpected joy. I began painting regularly, improving gradually, and finding meditative peace in the practice. 4 months after my abrupt departure from Chicago, I joined Jasmine and several other neighbors for dinner at a local restaurant. Midway through the meal, I realized I was genuinely laughing for the first time in months, maybe years. The realization was startling enough that I paused my fork halfway to my mouth. "Everything okay?" Jasmine asked, noticing my sudden stillness. I smiled, feeling tears prick my eyes. "Yes, I think for the first time in a very long time, everything is actually okay." Almost exactly 3 months after my departure, an email from Stephanie appeared in my inbox with the subject line, "Family emergency, please read." My finger hovered over the delete button before curiosity and lingering concern won out. The email painted a dramatic picture of the family's decline in my absence. Patricia had been forced to take a part-time position at a friend's interior design firm, her first actual job in over 30 years. The family home was facing foreclosure after missing 3 mortgage payments. Most concerning Richard's health had deteriorated with his cardiologist, recommending another procedure they couldn't afford without insurance approval, which was being delayed. Stephanie's tone shifted from accusatory to pleading halfway through. "I know Mom treated you badly and Brandon was no better. But Dad never did anything wrong. He's always been kind to you. Please don't punish him for their mistakes." After careful consideration, I responded that I would pay directly for Richard's medical care, but any other financial assistance would require a face-to-face conversation with the entire family. I suggested a meeting at a neutral location in Chicago the following week. The flight back to Chicago felt different from all my previous returns. I wasn't coming back as the dutiful daughter-in-law desperate for approval, but as a woman who knew her own worth. I booked a suite at a downtown hotel, rather than staying at the family home, another small but significant boundary. I arranged for the meeting to take place in a private dining room at a restaurant equidistant from my hotel and their house. Arriving early, I took deep breaths to center myself, remembering Jasmine's parting advice: "Stay anchored in your truth. Their reactions belong to them, not to you." Patricia entered first, and I was struck by how much she had aged in 3 months. The perfectly maintained appearance had slipped, revealing new lines around her mouth and eyes. Her clothes, while still expensive, looked slightly dated, rather than fresh from luxury boutiques. Brandon and Stephanie followed with Richard, moving slowly behind them with the assistance of a cane. The initial minutes were awkward with stilted greetings and careful seating arrangements. I had deliberately chosen a round table to avoid anyone sitting at the head. Once orders were placed and we were left alone, the real conversation began. "You've put the family through hell," Patricia opened, though her voice lacked its usual imperious tone. "I hope you're satisfied with the chaos you've caused." I met her gaze steadily. "I didn't cause chaos, Patricia. I simply stopped preventing it. There's a difference." Brandon interjected. "Can we please skip the blame game? We're here to figure out how to move forward." I nodded. "Yes, we are. But moving forward requires understanding how we got here. So let me be clear, I left, because I was treated with contempt, despite financially supporting this entire family for years. I was called uneducated, jobless, and a lowlife by Patricia, while you, Brandon, stood by and said nothing. Richard looked genuinely shocked, turning to his wife. Patricia, you said those things to Amanda. Patricia flushed. It was during an argument. Things were said on both sides. Actually, I corrected gently. I never insulted you. I simply stated facts about my financial contributions. Stephanie, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly spoke up. She's right, Mom. Amanda never said anything insulting to you, even when you were horrible to her. And Brandon, you always took Mom's side even when she was clearly wrong. The surprise of Stephanie defending me momentarily silenced everyone at the table. She continued, her voice gaining strength. Do you know what Mom said when Amanda left? She said we'd be fine, because Brandon could just find someone better with family money. She didn't even consider that Amanda was the one supporting us, not the other way around. Brandon looked stricken. Is that true, Mom? Patricia's eyes filled with tears, something I had never witnessed before. I didn't understand, she said quietly. I truly didn't understand how much we depended on Amanda, I thought. I thought her business was just a little online shop. I didn't realize. You never asked, I said. You never once asked me about my business with genuine interest. You never wanted to know what I actually did or how successful it had become. You were too busy being embarrassed by my lack of formal education to notice that I built a multi-million-dollar company from nothing. Richard reached across the table with a shaking hand, placing it over mine. I owe you an apology, Amanda. I knew you were helping us financially, but I had no idea of the extent. And I should have stepped in when Patricia spoke to you disrespectfully. There's no excuse for my passivity. The conversation that followed was raw and honest. Patricia admitted that her treatment of me stemmed partially from fear that Brandon would become dependent on me, rather than maintaining the family's social position through his own connections. Brandon confessed that he had deliberately downplayed my business success to his parents, afraid they would see him as a failure for not being the primary provider. I was supposed to continue the Lewis legacy, he explained, not meeting my eyes. Instead, I became completely dependent on my wife. My pride couldn't handle it, so I pretended it wasn't happening. After 2 hours of difficult but necessary conversation, I outlined my terms for continued financial support. Richard's medical expenses would be covered in full. I would pay off the existing mortgage on the family home, but would not continue monthly payments. And I would provide a one-time sum to help Patricia and Brandon establish financial independence, with the explicit understanding that it was the last assistance I would offer. And what about our marriage? Brandon asked quietly, as the meeting drew to a close. I looked at the man I had once loved enough to sacrifice my self-respect for. That depends on you, Brandon. I'm returning to Hawaii tomorrow. You're welcome to visit in a month after you've had time to think about what kind of relationship you actually want, not what your family expects. But know that I will never again live in a household where I'm not respected regardless of my educational background or family origins. As we prepared to leave, Patricia approached me separately. She looked smaller somehow, the imperious bearing diminished. I was wrong about you, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Not just about your business success, but about who you are as a person. Your generation calls it privilege, I think, but I never recognized how my background shaped my prejudices. It took losing everything to see it. Her apology seemed genuine if somewhat self-serving. I nodded acknowledgement but made no promises about forgiveness. That would take time if it came at all. The most surprising moment came from Stephanie, who asked if she could walk me back to my hotel. As we strolled through the Chicago evening, she revealed that my departure had forced her to confront her own entitlement. I always resented how much attention you got from Brandon, she admitted. I never considered that you were quietly supporting all of us while I was taking expensive vacations and failing at businesses you funded. Watching Mom have to actually work for the first time in my life was educational. Before we parted, she asked hesitantly if my company might have any remote positions available. I need to build something of my own, she explained. Without family connections or handouts, I need to know I can. I promised to have my HR director contact her about potential opportunities with the clear understanding that she would receive no special treatment and would start at an entry-level position, despite her medical background. As my flight took off from Chicago the next morning, I felt neither triumphant nor defeated. The family reckoning had been necessary, but exhausting. The path forward remained uncertain, particularly with Brandon, but for the first time since our marriage began, the ground rules had been honestly established. Whether our relationship could be rebuilt on this new foundation remained to be seen. 6 months in Hawaii transformed me in ways I never anticipated. The woman who arrived broken and exhausted had gradually been replaced by someone stronger, clearer, and more authentically herself. My business continued to thrive with our latest product line, inspired by Hawaiian concepts of harmony and balance, becoming our most successful launch to date. The team had expanded to 70 employees with operations in 3 countries and annual revenue exceeding $12 million. More important than professional success were the personal changes. My morning beach walks became non-negotiable self-care rather than therapy sessions. The watercolor painting that began as distraction evolved into a genuine passion, with several pieces now hanging in my home. Local friendships deepened beyond surface pleasantries to meaningful connections based on mutual respect rather than social obligation. Jasmine remained my closest confidant, her wisdom and acceptance helping me navigate the ongoing complications with Brandon and his family. Forgiveness doesn't mean returning to the same situation, she reminded me during our weekly coffee dates. It means releasing the anger, so it doesn't consume you, while still honoring the boundaries that protect your well-being. Brandon visited Hawaii 3 times during those 6 months. The first visit was tense and awkward with him, vacillating between genuine remorse and subtle attempts to convince me to return to Chicago. By the 3rd visit, something had shifted. He arrived with a portfolio of new paintings, having returned to his art after a 4-year hiatus. I remembered why I fell in love with creating, he explained, as he showed me his work. When I stopped trying to be what my family expected and started listening to my own voice again. We weren't ready to fully reconcile, but we began building something new a few days at a time. Brandon found a small studio to rent in town during his visits, respecting my need for separate space while we rediscovered each other without family pressure. Our conversations became more honest than they had been in years, discussing everything from financial independence to our different communication styles. Patricia surprised me by sending a handwritten 10-page letter that arrived exactly 6 months after our confrontation in Chicago. Unlike her previous performative apologies, this letter showed genuine reflection. She wrote about growing up with rigid expectations of maintaining family status, her fear of financial insecurity, and how these factors had warped her treatment of me. I mistook your different background for inferiority, she wrote. In reality, your self-reliance and creativity were strengths I never developed, because I was too busy maintaining appearances. I don't expect your forgiveness, but I want you to know that I recognize the harm I caused. The letter included no requests or manipulations, just honest acknowledgement. I appreciated it without feeling obligated to immediately restore our relationship. Healing would take time, and some wounds might leave permanent scars. Rather than let the family home go into foreclosure, I worked with a real estate attorney to renovate and sell it. The proceeds paid off all remaining debts and provided enough for Richard to move into a high-quality retirement community with excellent medical facilities. Patricia found a small apartment nearby, continuing her part-time work at the interior design firm, where, ironically, she had discovered she had a genuine talent for color coordination. Stephanie surprised everyone by thriving in her entry-level position at my company. Starting in customer service, she worked diligently to learn the business from the ground up, never leveraging our connection to seek advancement. Her medical background eventually proved valuable, as we expanded into organizational systems for healthcare facilities, earning her a legitimate promotion based on merit rather than nepotism. The most unexpected development came when Brandon asked if he could move to Hawaii part-time. "Not into your house," he clarified quickly. "I need to stand on my own 2 feet. But I'd like to be close enough to see if we can rebuild what we lost. Or maybe build something better." He found work teaching art at a local community center, rented a modest apartment, and began establishing his own identity separate from both me and his family. Our relationship evolved slowly into something more balanced than before, with clear financial boundaries and mutual respect, replacing the previous dynamic of provider and dependent. Patricia's path to redemption included cooking classes, something she had always considered beneath her as a society woman. She began sending me carefully packaged containers of my favorite desserts, with simple notes like, "Thinking of you," or "Hope you're well." These small, genuine gestures meant more than grand apologies ever could. One evening, as I walked along the beach at sunset, I reflected on the journey of the past year. The pain of being called a lowlife by my mother-in-law had triggered a cascade of changes that ultimately led to greater authenticity and self-respect. By leaving a toxic situation rather than continuing to enable it, I had not only reclaimed my own life, but inadvertently forced positive change for everyone involved. I had learned that financial support cannot buy genuine respect. I had discovered that setting boundaries isn't selfish but necessary for healthy relationships. Most importantly, I had realized that my worth was never dependent on someone else's validation, particularly from those who benefited from diminishing me. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, I felt a deep sense of peace. The woman who had once desperately sought approval from people who would never give it was gone. In her place stood someone who knew her own value and would never again compromise it for the illusion of acceptance. Some people only recognize your worth when you stop proving it to them. Some relationships can only heal when you're brave enough to walk away from them. And sometimes the greatest act of love for yourself and others is to say enough and mean it. Have you ever stayed in a situation far too long hoping things would change? Have you found the courage to walk away when you realized they wouldn't? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Remember to like this video if it resonated with you, subscribe for more stories about finding your strength, and share with someone who might need to hear that their worth isn't determined by others' approval. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose yourself.